John Skipper is from Mason City, and he has written a new biography on Meredith Willson called The Unsinkable Music Man. And John Skipper, thanks for being with us on WHO Radio.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
I have to say, I love The Music Man as a musical, and of course we, being in Iowa, have heard quite a bit about Meredith Willson, but you uncovered some things that most of us will be very surprised to hear. I had no clue, for instance, that Meredith Willson was married 3 times. It's because he never talked about his first wife, right?
Right. I think most people who are familiar with Meredith Willson realize that he was married twice. His second wife died of cancer, and then he married Rosemary. But he was married 26 years to a woman named Peggy Willson. Her maiden name was Wilson, incidentally, with one L. And but he never mentions her.
And he wrote 3 autobiographies and never mentioned his first wife in any of them.
Right. In fact, in one of the biographies, he mentions that he got married, and if you read closely, you discover that he's talking about his second wife.
Interesting. Why has there never been a biography written of him before? I was surprised to see this was the first one.
I don't know. I know of a couple of biographers who had started works on him, and I don't know what happened beyond that. That was one of the things that intrigued me about wanting to write the book, just simply the fact that it had never been done before.
And your background is not one in music. You've written books about baseball, right?
Right. I'm a professional writer and have been in newspaper work all my life, and have written 4 books on baseball. And when I was approached about writing the biography of Meredith Willson, there were a couple of things that intrigued me. One, like we said, that biography of him had never been written before. And second, I was looking for a project outside of baseball, because I consider myself a writer and a researcher, but not necessarily a baseball writer. So I wanted to try my hand at something different when this came along.
Well, it's a great book. I have to admit that I was kind of I couldn't put it down. It was so fascinating to read about him, because we all know about him, but really don't know that much.
Sure.
John Skipper has written Meredith Willson, The Unsinkable Music Man. It's available in bookstores. And if you do have any questions for John about Meredith Willson, feel free to call us now at 284-1040 or the INS toll-free line, 800-469-4295. John, there's lots of legends out there about Meredith Willson. Let me just go through a couple of them. You tell me if they're true or not.
Right.
I've always heard that he was the biggest baby ever born in Iowa.
Yes.
That's true.
He was the biggest baby born when he was born. He was
up to that time.
Baby born at just a little over 14 pounds.
Oh my gosh! I also heard that his parents essentially programmed the careers of he and his brother and sister.
Right. That is according to his sister Dixie. There were 3 Wilson children. His oldest sister, who was 12 years older than he was named Lucille, and everybody called her Dixie. And then he had a brother 2 years older, Cedric, and then there was Meredith. And Dixie said, Dixie wrote on time that her parents did program what they wanted their children to be. And they envisioned her as being an author, for example.
But they programmed them from the womb.
From the womb,
when they were still inside the mother, they were telling them what they were going to do.
Right. For example, when the mother was pregnant with Dixie, and they had decided that the father had read a book and about this and thought it was a good idea. So while she was pregnant with Dixie, for example, they would sit and read at night and talk about authors. They even put photographs of authors on the wall of their living room and that sort of thing. And Cedric should be a businessman, and their third child, Meredith, would be a musician.
And, of course, the sister did grow up to be a writer.
Right.
And it was interesting to read in your book that apparently the sister at one point, after The Music Man became popular, claimed that she was the one who came up with the idea for it.
Yeah, she did. She said that publicly at least twice.
But it sounds like Meredith didn't talk much to his sister after that.
Well, I'm not sure exactly about the relationship after that, because Dixie was 12 years older than Meredith, and they'd both gone their separate ways. So it's difficult to know how close they were before then, but they certainly weren't too close after she started talking about how she had the original idea.
Have you been able to decipher whether she did actually have the original idea?
Well, what we've been able to decipher is that Dixie wrote a letter to Earl Hall, who was the editor of the Globe-Gazette, complaining that she wasn't getting enough credit for The Music Man because it was her idea. And when Earl Hall wrote back to her, he said that he had seen the original manuscript of The Music Man, and he had seen the finished product on Broadway, and the latter didn't bear any resemblance to the former. And so that leads us to believe that in terms of the idea form, that perhaps there was some credence to that, but the finished product, and that happens a lot of times with writers. I can tell you from firsthand experience. You can be talking in a coffee shop with somebody, and somebody will give you an idea for something, and you take it off and run with it. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. John Skipper has written the new biography of our own Meredith Willson. It's called Meredith Willson, The Unsinkable Music Man. It's Meredith Wilson's life story, some fascinating information in there. John, I probably heard before, but I didn't realize that Meredith was actually his middle name.
Right.
Robert was his first name. And as I got into the book, I was surprised to see that his parents were divorced. And I'm sure that maybe that is common knowledge around here, but I had moved here in '89 and just kind of thought he had the perfect family upbringing because I had heard all these rumors like his parents had programmed his career and all this. But all of a sudden something happened in there and his parents split, and then later in life he didn't talk much about his dad anymore. He was much closer with his mom. Right.
The parents were divorced after about 31 years of marriage, and it was kind of a messy divorce. And the father, then within a year, married someone who was 4 years younger than his oldest daughter, and basically moved across the street from Meredith's mother. So it was difficult
very touchy.
Times.
Right.
And you see, Meredith was about 19 years old at the time, trying to make it on his own in New York. So the fact that this kid who had taken a train to New York and was trying to hook on with the Sousa band while all this was going on at home is just another example of the unsinkable music man.
But it was a very sad ending. You say in the book that Meredith didn't see his dad in his dad's last 7 years of life. And also you say here, never in my lifetime, Meredith says, never in my lifetime did I hear my name pass through my father's lips.
Yes, isn't that tragic?
That's hard to believe. His father never said his name. Apparently his dad was not happy that Meredith was born. He was the youngest child. He wasn't happy that they had a baby. But to have a father never say the name of his child.
It's remarkable.
Unbelievable. Well, let's talk quickly before we have to leave about The Music Man. Had an unusual original title.
Originally, it was titled The Silver Triangle.
The Silver Triangle.
Right.
As in musical instrument triangle?
Well, I think so. I think it was probably the triangle, the symbol, or the triangle, and you mentioned earlier the child in the wheelchair.
Yeah. Originally a character was written in a boy in a wheelchair.
Right. He decided that first of all, people need to realize it took him about 6 years to get the finished product from the time he started till the time that he actually completed the play. It started out called the Silver Triangle. One of the characters was a boy in a wheelchair. When he started trying to sell the play to be produced, the producers would say, "You got to get that kid with the wheelchair out of there because he's going to steal every scene." And it wound up being a child with a lisp, who was played by Eddie Hodges, and then Ronnie Howard in the movie.
And he stole every scene too.
Yes.
And I think in the book you kind of theorize where the name River City came from, and it has to do with his mother.
Yes, his mother, Rosalie, was a very domineering woman, and she's a sweet lady who ran the kindergarten and the Sunday school in Mason City for 30 years. But she had a way about her of trying to get things done that she thought should be done. There were two creeks that ran through Mason City that she thought should be designated rivers, and she tried to get the city council and everybody else who had a say in it to designate Willow Creek and Lime Creek as rivers, and never quite got it done.
So Meredith did it for her.
Yeah, so 40 years later, Meredith wrote a play and had the setting in River City.
Right, so he memorialized Mason City as River City and got his mom's dream to come true, basically.
Exactly.
Why, we only have a few seconds, but why did he keep coming back to Mason City? He left at age 17. He didn't have to come back. He was very famous, and we didn't even touch on all the other famous things he did. But why did he come back?
Well, I think that first of all, as you mentioned earlier, he was very close to his mother and would come back to see her. This thing that we always talk about that we call Midwest values, that nobody seems to know how to define, but you know it when you see it.
Right.
And I think he never lost that.
Right. And if folks want to hear more, they'll have to read the book Meredith Willson, The Unsinkable Music Man by John Skipper.